All right. Um, so first off, I'd like to say hi today. Just because something seems like magic to you doesn't mean it's off the table. I'm not going to be scared that you think something is magic. We don't know how gravity works now, so Newton could come along and say, "Look at all this information." You go, "Yeah, but how does that work? By magic?" It's just telling you how something that already is a known phenomena, more details about it. Not every detail. If somebody else thinks that that's magic, that's not an argument one way or the other. Your sense of magic seems to be that, I don't know, something that seems impossible to you. You can't imagine how it could be that way. Well, I can't imagine how it could be some way, and it doesn't mean that it can't be that way. I'm quite certain some things are operate in ways that I can't imagine, yet, and possibly that are unimaginable. It might take an infinite number of years of evolution to be able to imagine it, for all I know. And you say, what reason could I give you to do the not? You go through this whole example with God, and then you say, act like the burden is on me to, to get you to propose the not determinism thing, the not God thing. I've got to prove to you that you should take a principle called not God. No, I don't. It's still, like you said, the person that says something is the case, they're the ones that have to give evidence for it being the case, right? I understand some of the evidence of why you would have the hint that you think there's determinism because hundreds of years of physics went in that direction. But then we had a situation, first of all, what is determinism? To me, terms like that need to be translated back into uh, fundamental raw language that relates to this, right? To me, the idea of determinism is that you have one state and it leads to one possible subsequent state. That's determinism. If you have many states leading through an exchange into many other states, that would not be determinism. It also would not be non-mechanical because it's quite possible there is some sort of a way that things, just like there's gravity, and I don't know where that comes from. I don't get to assume that it's impossible for there to be multiple possible states. But I don't have to assume that if we had a five-dimensional space, that a three-dimensional creature couldn't wander around in there, even if the five-dimensional space was all fully furnished already. All the possibilities were there, and you could still have pathfinding. Right? And you can play the odds. If the universe is just random, if there's even that much looseness, you can play the odds. Just like throwing the dice is random what it comes up, but somehow the casino owner manages to use that randomness in a way that ensures that they're profitable at the tables. So, as far as I know, that's the open question. And no, I don't have to prove that you should adopt a not determinism principle, except for if you already have a determinism principle. And if that's what we're debating, you have that principle. I think it's an open question. So I don't really know what you're getting at when, trying to criticize me for explaining sometimes when I've gotten ideas, because I sort of like to remember a train of thought. I remember times when I thought differently, and that helps me have a perspective. As my feelings are over here, I can remember what it was like to feel this other perspective. And I say it about things that are a lot more recent, like thorium, what's that, 5 years ago or something. And it's just a part of the discussion. And when you hear that I have thought some way that I've only refined rather than overturned since my 20s, you're welcome to think that I'm just set in my ways. In my formative years, I came to an opinion, and it has extra weight because of that. And I should overturn it, but won't. There's other things I have overturned. And frankly, I think the skeptical view of life allows us to build on our knowledge. And if I get set in my ways, yeah, I'm not going to get to the infinite end of this process. People after me, people before me for that matter, can carry ideas further than, as it happens, I will carry before I die. And I think basically that if you're resorting to that, it's a bit silly. I mean, I do not say egotistical, I know I'm right and that's the way it is kind of stuff. I do not promote myself in that way. And if you're saying, yeah, but I watch you and I could see how, confident you are that these ideas are correct. Yeah, I'm trying. There are certain ideas that I'm confident about. I'm not confident that you know what they are, though, because things like determinism that you're arguing about how we have to think it all through where determinism is the case. My answer to that was, yeah, if there's no free will because determinism is the case, we're left with just a kind of a soft compatibilism where it's all an illusion, but we'll be able to explain why the illusion exists, right? We'll be able to put it in other words other than say, I decided to do this. We'll be able to put it in other words, just like when the sun rises and that turns out to be an illusion, I could put that in other words that get rid of the illusion. You're on the earth and you swing out of the shadow of the earth into the sunlight. And you will be able to do that with will if there is determinism. But having thought that through, like you're saying, through the whole argument, to me it seems when I thought that through, there's still a hard problem of this homunculus thing because of the observer. The observer implies this entity that is experiencing what it's like to feel this information that it's getting, and to feel its reaction to that information, right? So you still have the hard problem because the question is, why are there these things? And you, again, I think disingenuously or just because you don't want to see the argument that I'm making or something, you act like I was saying clocks might have this internal consciousness, whereas I was arguing that you and I presumably both agree they don't have it. But when we're talking about something that does have it, you say, well, it's just mechanistic. But so is the clock. Clockwork universe, a bunch of clocks. That's mechanistic. And where in there can there be the first person? It doesn't happen in there. So obviously there's some other detail between the two kinds of systems that has to be dealt with when you're talking about knowledge in general, I think. All knowledge. You have to go back to the evidence a lot. People's interpretations go awry rather quickly. And it's good to go back to the evidence. But especially in the question of will, right? Especially in the question of why is there this first person experience? And you say, I'm just assuming. I'm not assuming that it happens. I'm experiencing that it happens. I'm asking you, do you not have an internal stream of imagery and emotions? Does it not feel like you're making decisions? I understand you think it's an illusion, but you still seem to admit that this is happening, this thing. And when you make a deduction that minimizes it and says we don't have to worry about that, the feelings, that's all subjective, which is what this all fucking is. It doesn't matter. We don't have to think about subjective things. We have the subjective thing. But all the information that you built this little model out of, it was all taken out of here. Really, you take all of this data and you filter out the stuff. Oh, that was a hallucination. That was just a feeling of love. Not considering it, not considering it, not considering it. Here's what we have left. And you go, look, this is the whole world. Everything we didn't consider, it's now part of the whole world. Well, it still is a part of the world, right? And so I still think you have the homunculus problem, which makes it hard. Describing action without an observer, that's easy. There's an avalanche. We don't think there's an internal observer of it. The action still happens. Why? Forces interacting. That's mechanical. Describing an observer, however, an observer, and there's no action, that's difficult. And describing the observer that is acting, that's about a similar amount of difficulty. You know what I'm saying? We're experiencing the choices. The amazing part is that we're experiencing something. If it turns out that the choices are an illusion, the amazing part is that we're experiencing something. That can't just be ignored. The first person point of view can't be ignored. We're getting beyond a first person point of view by having multiple points of view, multiple agent points of view. One person's point of view over time, moving around in space, triangulating on things. That's how we're getting this idea of the objective universe. This is the universe between agents. If we grant and we believe another person has agency and we're discussing what's going on around us, all of that information that we're all providing and interpreting, that has to be the source of our idea of this objective shared world in between us. And why do I put it as in between us? Because, well, if we're in a matrix, is it the external world? No, we're all still in a matrix, but it's still the world in between us, this shared world, this shared set of information we seem to be drawing from. And all of our information about the shared set comes from here. So you say it doesn't matter what you feel like, but we are experiencing the will just like we experienced the sunrise. And it does need to be explained. And when we're actually discussing issues like what is the nature of it, you don't get to say, well, I want to use a picture where it doesn't exist. I'd like to use a picture where it doesn't exist. And I'd like you to assume my picture where it doesn't exist and then tell me how could it exist. No, I want you to use the picture we actually share. I don't share your little picture of what a mechanical universe looks like. I have an idea of a mechanical universe, but it doesn't follow the rules you seem to assume. But we both have this. We have no choice but that both of us have our own stream of information. We both have this. That's why I'm demanding that you recognize something we both share. You're demanding I recognize something I don't share the opinion that it's true. And when you tell me about a scientific experiment you've done, I know it's just because there's a few frames in here where you were in the lab doing that experiment. This doesn't have to go away. And you say, well, I got the information. If you did the experiment, here's the information you'd get. Wouldn't matter that it was in a different lab and the different series that may be done over a couple days, whatever difference is, because we're going to ignore those differences. We're going to just have what, the information we can both get from that experience. And then that's a part of physics. Fine, but you're ignoring a lot of other things to do that, which is fruitful because we're trying to focus in on information. We don't care what we each had for lunch in the middle of the experiment. Fine, that's useful, but this data all still exists, right? That data could still be important for certain things, right? Especially things that your experiment specifically ignores. Like the hard problem of why is there an observer? Why is there an observer that feels like it's making choices? Pretty much the same question as why is there an observer at all? Even if somehow you knew ahead of time, well, it's not really making choices, you'd still have why is there an observer? How is that possible? You want to say we figured out the universe, it's mechanical, but the set of rules that make up our understanding of mechanics as you're using it doesn't include any hint of any way for this to occur. Zero. And you want to discuss this and whether it's fake before having that. No, we need to find the mechanical explanation that this exists. And as far as this idea of, and again, I thought you were a little disingenuous about this. I mean, my rendition of how the conscious mind that we think of as, us, comes to think I might want a biscuit, was meant to show that that could just be an illusion. It's really the willful creatures in your neural system that are having a conversation that gets to the point where you project that idea. I think you should acknowledge that I'm saying, look, I understand where you're coming from. I understand how the feeling of will, I also use the video game example, the feeling of will can be just an illusion. And this is not a again, this is a perspective that goes back, God only knows how long, but way before those uh, pop physics reports on being able to see the brain waves of a decision before the person can report the decision. So the person has to report it. Doesn't mean they didn't know just because it took them a second to formulate language about it. That's a whole different thing. If I was arguing with that, believe me, there's a lot of other grounds. Not arguing with that. I have long thought we're just from deducing, looking at it, and then I would figure out how it makes sense after, because we are a colony of eukaryotic cells. So clones and clones of each other. We're that. So consciousness has to break down into pixels of consciousness, where it comes from. And yeah, in the cell, what's going on? Well, in the cell, there's the cytoskeletons, which is carrying all this information. And then there is a very similar thing. I went in and I need sugar. 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 Kind of sugar. I want low energy. And then it goes, I don't want a sugar. And that comes out until the guy's going, I think I'll have a cupcake. So yeah, it goes even lower. How low is it going to go? It's going to go to the laws of the universe. What's being collected into will, determinist or not, whatever it is, it's a physical phenomenon. So we know that it's being generated by and consists of something in nature. Like there's electricity all around you, but you don't notice it. You don't get shocked every day and everything you touch. But if you have an electrical circuit, it's electricity flowing and flowing and flowing and flowing. And consciousness has to be something like that. Why? Because we're material creatures. So it has to be forces and energy, matter, whatever there is in the universe. And if you want to call it magic, I would say no. This magic has rules. It follows rules. It has patterns. It is concrete. You think of it as magic because you can't fathom it, but it's not magic. It's just physics that was beyond your current intuition. That the substrate and interaction that allows the phenomena of a point in the universe, it's a cloud of chemicals in the universe, to feel that I'm experiencing something, that phenomena, it has to come from the universe somehow. There has to be a way to generate it, and we have zero information on how it's generated. And you could go, well, the brain generates it. Yeah, well, that's where it's generated. I agree, we've narrowed it down to that. Though again, not entirely, because the whole body puts off hormones and there's all kinds of effects. But I think we pretty much, in the sense that we say it's in the brain, yeah, it's in the brain. You could take away a body, have a brain. I bet if you could plug into it, there'd still be a personality that could talk to you, kind of like that person, maybe a bit in shock. You take the brain out of the body, you're not going to get that person, just the body. So, but that's where, that's not how. So yeah, I don't get why you think the most logical thing is that I would have to give you a reason to not determinism, to have the principle of not determinism. The beginning situation is you have one of these. I'm telling you, you don't have to believe me, but I also have one of these film strips. And whether it's determined or not between the frames, that's an open question. But we both agree it doesn't seem to be determined in the day-to-day. It seems like you can make a choice. But I admit that maybe that's an illusion. You say you already think that's an illusion. You think that it's an illusion, and you think determinism is real. You're the one proposing a principle that defies how it appears. And that's great. That doesn't mean you're wrong. I propose a principle of why the sun rises not as it appears. The sun looks like it's moving, but you're the one that's moving. I propose a counterintuitive explanation of that. Not the first assumption a creature makes when they see the sun rising, but a subsequent reality that's more subtle and so requires some explanation. So how does that happen? And why should I have to prove to you a not determinism? Where'd you get determinism from? I don't see where you saw determinism in here. Oh, I'm fibbing a bit, because where you saw determinism is we had some science for a few hundred years. It was super successful that claimed outright there's determinism. I could tell you the future. If I knew where everything was and the momentum, I could tell you the future. Well, we don't have that science anymore. You can't tell all the positions of all the objects. That's impossible. You can't tell the position in the momentum, which you need them both to tell the future. So current science says you can't tell the future. You say, yeah, but there's still one particular future. Fine, but you're the one that has to tell me why there would be one particular future when it doesn't look like here and it doesn't look like in the quantum mechanics lab that there is. Right? And if you think it's just a matter of egotism somehow, that's how we can debate this, right? Like, who's more humble? And that's the one that's more right. Well, no, it would obviously have nothing to do with it. And I don't think you're more humble about it than me at all. You seem very, very confident that if the universe isn't deterministic, then that's magic. And so anybody like me that believes, well, determinism, certain definitions of determinism are true by definition. But that version of determinism where there's one state leading to one next state, that doesn't seem true to me. It seems to me there's multiple possible states can lead to a current state, and that the current state can lead to multiple future states. So the only thing that's singular is the current state. For some reason, the current state is singular, but it looks like there's multiple possible contributors on both sides of that. So I don't think you need to make a not determinist principle, because I think that's still an actually open question. It tends to be in the multi-state to multi-state camp, but I admit it's an open question. I have thought through, well, what if it is determinist, and decided that that doesn't eliminate the hard problem. Because the hard problem is not describing how a human behaves, but why there's the internal experience. So it's not merely difficult, right? It's that there's a lot of difficult things that we think we could figure out. How to get oil from new places that we haven't done, or whatever, right? We have hints. We know, well, if we work on this and work on that, we'll have the solution. We can figure that out. It's nothing like that for consciousness. All of neurology and all the rest of that's explaining behavior. How a brain can create the behavior we see, right? And that's the easy problem. That's because that's not actually easy. That's going to take centuries, if it can ever be done, which I think it can. But that's going to take centuries. But that's still the easy problem, because we have hints that, oh, we'll just keep going in the direction of answering those questions for centuries and we'll get them. We don't even know what questions to ask in terms of how could there be this internal thing. And you're going to think it's magic because I'm saying it has to come from physics. There has to be a field related to the action of willing, or 6 fields and 5 kinds of energy, or whatever it takes to have a system where the end result is not the behavior. That's interesting too, but that's the easy problem. But that we have this internal experience of what it feels like to be having a feeling. And you admit this is happening. So we agree that this is happening. So I would say we should start from the thing we both agree is happening. You say you agree, but you want to discard it. And you want me to take your idea that isn't my film strip and it's not your film strip, It's an idea you got from your experiences, and I'm supposed to take that, and then we discuss from that. No, let's discuss from the thing we both agree exists. There is no information from outside of here, right? You tried to use the example of a priori truths, but you only know about a priori truths because you're introduced to it in here. The idea of an a priori truth is from in here. When you get a candidate like the law of identity, it came from in here. Even if you're the first person to have made it up, it's because you did the work and you learned math and from experiences in here. So I think it's fair to say that we should start from that. And I think if I thought this way from my 20s, it's just because no one could deny that this happens. And to find something nobody can deny, that's an axiomatic search, right? We're trying to find things we all agree on, or even could be taken to agree on to a certain degree. But so far, nobody's denied that, yeah, all information they get is in their stream of perceptions. And how could they?